to these questions throughout our workshop, but we want to give you a couple of minutes to do some reflecting. So the first prompt is, what routines are helping you to thrive in this role? Like, what's your schedule? Are you primarily doing these tasks on weekends, weekdays? Take a minute or two to think about the routines that are helping you to thrive and who some of your partners are. Take a moment to think, what are your biggest challenges that you're facing so far in your role? The third prompt is, what advice would you give to a new treasurer? And the fourth prompt is, what's your approach to helping your council members and your congregation to understand the financial reports? And we'll take some time with that a little bit later in the workshop, giving you some suggestions, but that often ends up being a role that you play to interpret the finances and the reports in a way that your council members and your congregation can understand. So take a minute now to write some reflections, and I have writing utensil if anybody needs one. This is handout 1, correct. The second page of handout 1. Okay, we'll come back to those questions and to your responses to those questions throughout the workshop. And for now, we're going to transition into the other side of your bright yellow page. And we're going to walk our way through the Treasurer and Financial Secretary's Best Practices document. This was created by the ELCA. And there's a number of resources that we're going to look at on the computer, but we wanted this one to actually be in your hands. This would be the guidance for the best practices, and we're going to talk our way through it, reading each bullet point, and then inviting you to either add or change based on your own experiences. All right, so as congregation treasurer, your role, first and foremost, is to serve as the financial officer of the congregation, to attend months. So I'll read all the way through and then we'll come back to talk about anything you change or adapt. To attend monthly meetings of the council, to provide oversight of the financial secretary duties and processes. You're often responsible for paying bills, invoices, and charges, to perform or oversee bookkeeping functions, to prepare monthly or quarterly financial reports, and to file all required federal and state forms. The second half of your job description includes monitor the cash position of the congregation and report monthly to the Finance Committee Chair, Council President, and Pastor, to invest available funds as directed, to borrow funds as directed by the Council, provide the congregation with financial information deemed appropriate by the Council, assist in the preparation of the annual budget, maintain, develop, and improve the reporting and monitoring techniques used to communicate the financial status of the congregation, prepare the annual report of the financial status, and to assist with closing the books for a yearly audit. So for those of you in the room who are currently serving as treasurer, is there anything about this list that surprises you, or that you'd like to hear more about from another treasurer in the room? When you started in the role as treasurer, what was provided to you?
Donna.
Good.
I am lucky.
Yes.
If it wasn't for her, seriously, our church should. Once it's time for her to retire, they got a big role they have to fill. They have to find the right person, because honestly, she does, you do such a great job, so.
Mentor. So you had a mentor right there with you, walking you through the learning of your role.
Yes.
Sounds like, yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So part of this workshop too is that Cheryse and I are learning what the landscape of treasurers looks like so that we can best support treasurers. So we're curious to know when some of you started as treasurer, what are other onboarding processes what did other onboarding processes look like?
This is what we did, here you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is what we've done, because it's rotating every year, you have a different treasurer.
Yep.
And so it was
Okay.
like, I just did it the same way the last person did it, and they did it the same way the last person did it. But that's not right. So then, you gotta. And
I want to ask you a question. Why does the church do it every year? I wonder. Is it just something
they're
always
on
done?
1 year terms.
It's a 1 year term,
Mhm.
really?
Yeah, and so I'm the first person to be in the permanent position, kind of like Donna.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so
Okay.
now we'll have the rotating treasurer, but I'll be the permanent person now. So there's a little more stability with it.
Mhm.
But it was just kind of like, what we've been doing, like, here you go, you figure it out.
So I take it there's quite a few churches that do that. 1 year terms.
That's ours.
Definitely have staff doing that.
Ours has a 1 year term unless replacement can't be found.
Okay, and you understand that.
Treasurer for long that.
Right.
I started with, they bought a laptop that's for the church, for the treasurer to use. And the previous treasurer bought QuickBooks, but it didn't have accounts payable on it. So what's the purpose of having it? So then I had to research and get all of that done. And he had it on his desktop, so it didn't transfer properly, so nothing balances anymore. So he's tried to help me. I'm kind of at the point where just let me figure it out but we do 3-year terms and we can go 2 3-year terms. So I'll be treasurer for 6 years and then it'll go to somebody else.
Is it QuickBooks?
QuickBooks. We did the QuickBooks Pro. And it's working well, but there's a cheap QuickBooks and it does not have accounts payable on it. So don't spend your money on it.
Yeah.
The $100 one won't work. The $600 one is a little better.
Have you ever read the book, QuickBooks for Dummies?
I've done QuickBooks in
Almost
several-
the first thing in there, it says, don't use this for a church, because it does not have anything in there for dedicated funds. I don't know how you're handling dedicated funds. but,
I haven't gotten, that's not in my concerns even yet.
Yes.
I just want to get the bills paid each month at this point.
Right.
Yeah. Well, then Sarah, especially so, hear us when we say we celebrate you and we're thankful for your ministry. And it sounds like there's going to be 6 years. Like this year is going to be a steep learning curve.
Right.
And then you're going to have systems in place. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about for others who are serving as treasurer or financial secretary, is there anything else that really worked well for your onboarding? Bruce?
I had a situation where I have an assistant treasurer who basically is appointed by the council. And really, they could probably reverse the names and it probably would sound better as far as what's being done. She understands the position better than I do because she's been doing it for quite a while. So that was in a really good training situation
Yeah.
as far as meeting. And we use Shepherd staff at the church.
Okay. Great.
There's a couple of questions or a couple of things that just came in on the chat. Joyce Nelson had commented that she's on a 3-year term. So that's a little bit different than some of you are saying. And Jackie has a question about how do you define dedicated funds? So I don't know where that fits in, but I thought I'd
Thank you,
throw that
Paul.
in there.
Yeah. I would be glad to share what it looks like on a Synod level. Jeff, you had mentioned dedicated funds. Do you want to talk about what it looks like in Lake City?
Well, when I became the treasurer, we have a 2-year term. And you can be reelected for another 2-year term. And then I think, I'm getting a feeling that if they don't find anybody to take the job over, on again, and maybe a lifetime.
Pretty much.
But, yeah, dedicated fund, now this might be different in all your churches, would be a special gift that is given. A hymnal fund is a great idea. Except you get $42 in it. You have to keep track of it for life. It's kind of like an endowment. And you keep track of it for life, and $42 goes from buying 2 hymnals to 1.5 to a new cover for 1 hymnal. And, you got other things like building funds. A building fund is a dedicated fund. The ladies' aid. Very bad terminology these days, but it's still there. Yeah.
So, would it be fair to say a dedicated fund is, has a concrete purpose, and dollars from that fund can only be spent for that purpose?
Exactly.
Does that feel like a good, yeah? And a lot of times in your monthly reports, those dedicated accounts will show up on a separate spreadsheet. All right, let's transition into, well, we can come back to the financial secretary description and some more learning together, but we want to make sure that we have a little time to talk to you about some of the connection points between what happens in our Synod office and your role as treasurer and secretary. And we'll just talk through best practices. Hopefully this feels like a conversation, because we really want to learn to what works best in your context. So Cheryse is going to walk us through a couple Synod specific processes.
I would think most of you would recognize this. It's the Senate Congregational Remittance Form. They're sent in with any funds that you send to the Senate office. I know some churches send their checks directly from the bank, and most times it says mission support on the check. And sometimes they'll sneak a little thing on a check that says World Hunger or certain missionary, and the print is this big, which can be missed so easily. And it happened to me this summer. And we really appreciate that, and we'd really like to see these every time money is sent in, especially when you put your phone number and who the treasurer is, because we have a question, we can spend hours trying to figure out who the treasurer is, and it's right here. This is really useful to us, and these are kept, so we can always go back and have history, and if we have a question, we can call you. So if you're not using, we kind of understand some of the bigger churches don't, but we really do appreciate it. It makes our job here in the office, much easier, and we don't waste time having to make phone calls to check on the funds, because once you put it into a fund and there's an error, it's not always the easiest to get it back out, especially if it's been sent to churchwide. Then we had to contact churchwide and backtrack everything. So it's really important if you could use this. We'd greatly appreciate that.
So basically, every time you send a check to the Synod office, if you could have a remittance form attached with it, that would be great. And you can find the remittance form, copies of it, on our website under, I'll walk you back through. Our new teammate Sadie made this awesome presentation under congregations, and then forms and reports, and then congregational remittance form. And there's a doc version and a PDF version that you can write in. And as Cheryse was describing, you face the same dynamic in a congregational level, right? You get checks that a lot of times they're for a weekly offering, but sometimes it's a special offering or it's related to a funeral that was held. The more information you have, the better. Is the same on a Synod level. So it's the same kind of thing. The checks come to the Synod office and they get processed, and we just want to make sure it always goes to the right spot.
The next one, which you probably filled out within the last month or so, the mission support plan for 2023. I have bugged a few people because I haven't gotten theirs. And this is online also. And it kind of looks like the front and back. And the more information you fill out on this is important. We have tried to keep track of presidents and treasurers in our database, which makes it a little easier to connect with you. But this is one problem we have on the back sometimes. We ask you what you gave actual in 2022. Then we ask what your support's going to be for 2023. And when I get these sometimes, they're not even close to the numbers that you've given or anything. And I think that half the problem, I don't know if it's a president fills out, but sometimes the president fills out, sometimes the pastor fills it out, and sometimes the treasurer fills it out. So I think there's a disconnect there. And then when it comes to me like that, I think, well, I need to actually contact them and see, because mistakes are made, and I make them. I'm the first one to admit to it. I will make a mistake, and we want that correct. And mission support, maybe we should talk a little bit about that too. That is the funds that you send to the Synod office. That 43% is sent to churchwide. Another percentage is kept at the Synod for activities like this, events that we put on. And that's what we use it for. And it's really, and we use it for our budget. So we can plan ahead, because that's very important.
So is that our benevolence dollars?
Yes, that's the old thing.
No.
Yeah.
Benevolence, right.
And that's kind of the next thing I wanted to cover too,
Mhm.
because mission support and missionary support. For some reason, we started using mission in everything we did. That was the first mistake I felt we did. And that came from a lot from churchwide. Because when we ask for mission support, they think, oh, missionaries. No, it's not. This is mission support. This is our benevolence. That's the old word we used to use many years ago. So if you ever have a question, don't hesitate to give us a call. We will definitely walk you through things. That's no problem at all. Have you had problems with that, or does the treasurers usually fill this out? Who does in your church?
I'm hoping the guy before me did, because I've never seen it before.
Yeah. Now we're talking about that, your new treasurer, the packets we send out, there's a packet that's sent out from our Senate office that has all these things in it. The intent, the mission support, the remittance and intent, and a lot of other information in there. And if you're not getting that, we'd like to know, because it might be sitting on pastor's office, or it might be in a mailbox somewhere. They didn't know where to put it, because it comes out in January.
Yeah, usually the second week of January.
Right.
And your congregation will also receive that information digitally, but there's always a letter from the bishop, the report of the ministries of the Synod for the past year that you could use in your congregational annual report, and then all the different forms that Cheryse is describing. So that comes usually the second week in January every year. Does anybody have any questions about that packet? Yeah, please.
Will there ever be intentions of making this digital so we can submit the payment online? Or can you do that right now?
Yeah, yeah, you can. You can submit the form, you can do online, but also mission support, you can submit online through on the Synod's website, there's a giving tab. If you click giving, one of the 3 fund options that you have is mission support.
Okay.
So that is a great point. Congregations can give mission support dollars. Well, first of all, thank you for giving mission support. The second piece is you can give that at the frequency that's right for your congregation. So it's helpful for people to know there's some congregations who share mission support dollars once a month in an automated way. There's some congregations that share mission support dollars quarterly and some that share mission support dollars annually. And that can either come as a physical check or online. Both options are wonderful and appreciated. Thanks for that clarification. Yes.
I believe welcome gets dollars as well to BLCA. Is that separate from churches, or how does that process work? Do they get combined at some point in time, or do they still all remain separate?
It varies depending on how if Welka used a form like this and it was really clear on the check that it was intended to be a gift from Welka, not a gift from the congregation, we can account for it separately. Sometimes it ends up together, like in the annual statement of a congregation. Sometimes it will reflect those Welka gifts as well. But anytime a congregation has a preference, we honor that preference. So if you would prefer that the Welka gifts are pulled out from the congregational gifts, we can account for it that way in your annual statement.
Sure.
Yeah, that's great. And your congregation also receives in the mail every quarter a quarterly giving statement. And that will always be personalized and signed by a member of the Synod staff, either Bishop Hassanelli or another member of the staff, thanking you for your gift. And it will be like you have statements for your congregational members, you as a congregation receive a quarterly giving statement.
And I'll add on to that, when you get that statement, please review it. Because if we find out 6 months from now, there's something wrong on it, we have to backtrack, or at the end of the year. So our fiscal year ends in the Senate office, January 31st. I would dare bet most of your churches end December 31st or another time out throughout the year. I know there's some churches that end at different times. So that can make a difference too.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any questions at all? I would like to also add, just from past experiences, if there's a fund that you want, you know, there's always like now Ecuador has had the earthquakes. So I'm assuming that might be coming through to churchwide. Sometimes we don't get that information right away. You should call us if you have something out of the blue that comes in and says we want to give money to Senate. A lot of times we have to send it back to you. We don't have the capability to send it forward to churchwide, or if it's for something totally not church related, church ELCA related. You know, like buying animals sometimes, you know, at Christmas, that you should go directly to that organization. Any questions? Okay, one thing I am working on right now, so I'm gonna bring it up. And if you haven't done these yet, I will gladly help you in any way I can. I walked a woman through it the other day, and I greatly appreciate that she called me and says, where are they? What's the password? You have to have your congregational ID number. If you don't know what that is, call and make sure you have that in a place, because you use that a lot. It's on every statement, every remittance form you send in. And if you haven't gotten them done, please do them as soon as possible. The cutoff was March 15th. They extended it this year a little bit because Churchwide was late sending them out. And this is really important. And one thing I want to mention on here that is always done wrong a lot of times. Remember line 21, it's also the same place you put the mission support for 2023. So if you did your intent, that same number should be the same one there. And over here on line D, under 23, it shows that mission support is gave for the year, the past year, 22. That should match the statement that you received. And if it doesn't, there's something wrong. And it doesn't include World Hunger, because that's on the next line. This is just basically mission support that you gave through that year. That's where the biggest mistakes really happen on these two forms.
And the form you're referring to is Form A.
Form A.
So that, those are annual reports.
Right.
The congregation will get them in the mail.
Yep.
And digitally if they have emails.
Yes, right.
I think just the, I don't know if the treasurer gets them.
That
think
was
only
my
I get
next
them.
question. We would like to know who Churchwide sends these to.
Yeah, I think it only comes to me.
To the-
I share it with my
To the
treasurer.
president, because their password and everything would be in there.
Cor- Correct. So I think when they, you know, how they do their roster, you know, they have
Yes.
their own account. So I think they just decide who the head of the organization is going
Okay.
to be based on that. And because rostered leaders are sometimes, you know, there for longer tenures.
Right,
They will choose the rostered leaders email,
right. Because that person's there. probably-
or sometimes, you know, that there won't be a rostered leader, so then it would go to whatever email is printed for like the office,
Right,
which again, that means we have to send those things.
yes. Mhm.
Because it's important.
I don't know how we ever got this set up, but so I received one as the pastor, but then our office manager, who's also our bookkeeper, also receives it. And, but she's been there for 20 years.
Okay.
So somehow we did get that set up. So
Yeah.
there must be some possibility that you can get from church-wide to, you know, if you have somebody, it's gonna be there a long time, you can,
Mhm.
please don't ask me.
And it's kind of critical because there's a unique ID password that is generated just for your congregation.
And changes.
So you
every
can't, it
year.
changes every year. They decide what it's going to be for security. So if you don't actually have yours, you can't borrow the neighbor's form.
No, not at all.
Good point.
And also on the same, on our website, after you, no, I don't know if it's there or not. There's instructions and a financial worksheet that you can figure things out, which makes it very much a lot easier for you if you have questions. And I don't talk much about Form C. It's not as exciting as this one, I think, because it's numbers and stuff around here. But this one is really about churchwide this year. The new thing that they're talking about, they want to know how you're welcoming people into your congregation. So that's beneficial to fill out also. And, let's see, Emily.
Mhm.
Senate
Yes.
Budget.
So before I go any further, I just want to share a huge word of affirmation for my colleague Cheryse. So Cheryse truly believes that every question is a good question. And as I've learned my role, I've learned it by working with Cheryse. And she's seen it from both sides. She's seen it as a church treasurer and as a Synod staff member. So we really want to encourage you. Our role is in part to make your work and your ministry easier. So please know that if there are processes that are in place that we could improve or things that could help you live into your role more fully, we always want to make that possible. And whether it's a small question or a big question, we're available. So please know that and hear that. I wanted to take a moment to explain to you. So related to this mission support piece, you might be wondering, how do we know what that number should be? Like, what should our congregation be sharing in mission support? And that is it's a wonderful and important question. And it's something that your congregation discerns in conversation with your council and with your congregation. And every year, your congregation has an annual meeting during which they're approving their budget. Sometimes our process is like, last year's budget kind of worked, it was pretty good, let's just do the same thing this year. Sometimes a council has a longer process of really discerning the budget. When it comes to mission support, those dollars that really represent what we do together as a whole denomination. We would love to partner with you in those conversations that happen at your congregation. What that means is I or another Synod staff member can come to a council meeting and talk more about what mission support is, what ministry is accomplished through it, and what might be right for your congregation. But when it comes to benevolence / mission support, we never dictate to a congregation what that dollar has to be. The hope is that it's a dollar amount that feels right to your congregation and that it's something that you can feel excited about and hopeful about. And also your congregation always has access to the Synod's budget. And I just want to briefly touch on the Synod's operating spending plan. The Synod spending plan is primarily what we call it, but you might be more comfortable with the language of budget. I think it's helpful for people to know where that budget comes from. And it comes through the people of the Synod. So we have a Synod council, just like you have a congregational council. And in the winter, that Synod council gets together to discern and make recommendations about a spending plan for the coming year. So they make initial recommendations. And then there's a Synod assembly every May. Have any of you ever attended the Synod assembly before? Yeah, every congregation can send voting members. It's during that event that the people of the Synod vote on the spending plan. So if you ever have questions about the spending plan, or you wonder, what does mission support do? Or if the people at your council want to know more about it, we always take that as a good and beautiful thing. We're glad to talk about it. It's your budget, it's your Synod, and it's something that we do together. Does anybody have any questions about that? Our hope is always to build transparency so that the Synod's operating budget is something that you can feel good about contributing to through mission support. We have about 7 minutes to go, and we wanted to take a little time to show you a huge amount of additional resources that are available to you for free. Have any of you ever explored the church-wide website? Yeah. So this is on your white handout. There's a big list of resources. And we won't go through every single one, but Cheryse, which ones would you want to highlight that exist?
The ones, you see lists there, the ones I'm really gonna highlight for you, and I use it as a treasurer quite often. Congregational audit. I didn't care about the churches so much. I cared about my own safety. That's why I asked for an audit. I want you to audit the books so you can see what I'm doing. And I hate to say this, when I first started in the Senate office, there was embezzlement going on at other Senate offices at that time. And this is probably one of the easiest places to embezzle money. You really need, I know people say, how do you do an audit? It's just, there's a thing here you can look at, resources. And just follow them. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to take weeks and months and stuff. But just for your own treasurer's well-being or financial secretaries, you definitely need to do that. And the other one, the financial best practices, I think that's a really important one. And it's very nice. It's very simple to read. And it's very beneficial. And the very last one on there, the double I, that's a retention. There's some of these things like personnel files, I have to keep 50 years. I work with personnel in the office. They're to be kept 50 years, which is unreal, you know? Things like that, it tells how long they should be kept. And I get a lot of calls about that. So I think if you could download that and pass it on, especially this part for financial records and different things, I think it's really important. Those are the three that I really highly recommend. I know it's hard. I happen to be working in an accounting office with my sister, and she does pastor's taxes. And the biggest problem she has is the W-2s come in and they're off. They're wrong. They are so wrong. And take a look at that. And what I would suggest, and she would suggest too, look for someone in your community that can help or volunteer time if you don't know how to do W-2s. It's very important. I mean, actually, she does her churches for free. I mean, so kind of put feelers out there. I had one call last week. I said, is there anybody in your town? She said, yeah, the accountant. I said, call the accountant. Just say where you're at. You're new. Tell them you're looking to do W-2s. And it was payroll. It was coming up to 15th. And this was like Monday, the 13th, and she was new. Look for that. You know, it's not a weakness for you. It's people will help you if you ask them. You're more than glad to help. So that's one thing I will pass on to you about that. But the rest of them are very good things to look at, and also good things to have on hand as things come up, especially for new people.
And these all live on the same website, our ELCA website under finance. They're just a host of PDF resources available for you. And we encourage you to make use of those. As we get ready to wrap up, what's a piece of advice that you would give to a new treasurer? You can just shout these out. What advice would you give? Even if you're a newbie yourself, what's some advice you'd give to a new treasurer?
Get a Donna.
Get it. Find a mentor is another part of that. Yes. What else? What other advice would you give?
What we found is to have a separate financial secretary, separate treasurer,
Yes.
so that they can work together to cross-check.
Yeah, have that be
Because-
two different roles.
Yep, two
Yeah.
different roles, because we didn't have that for a while and we ran into problems.
Great advice, Greg.
So glad you brought that up, because auditors, they will suggest that. That's the first thing they'll suggest. We actually have 3 people involved in our office that works with it.
And then we do an audit at the end of the year, so.
Good
It's been a
advice.
big change.
Yeah,
Right.
good.
A recommendation that I would make is if you don't have a computerized system, get one.
What's the best program
Mm.
to use?
I'm not gonna recommend a program. I mean, there's a Shepherd staff right there. That's one of them. It's really good. There are programs that are written by, I think the Shepherd staff is written by Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, if I'm not mistaken. Comes out of Concordia.
Mhm.
And, you know, that's a great one to have. When I came to my church, there were 7 different programs that we used. They were doing payroll on one that I had never seen in my life. And I have been an accountant all my life, and I have been a treasurer more times than I can count. I found out I was from the Farm Bureau.
Mhm.
Now, here's where treasurers come from. This guy runs an orchard, and he had a program to pay his people in the orchard, so he just took and threw it in there for the church. It doesn't mean Italy for the
Mhm.
church. It's confusing. First thing I did, well, I found somebody to do the payroll. Because there's nothing more confusing than coming up to the end of the year and let's see now, how did W-2 go?
Yeah.
And it's
Outsource it if you can.
you know, it's great to get, you find a volunteer, but really and truly, I went out and I hired a company,
Mhm.
Paychecks.
Yeah.
They do our checks. They do two wonderful things that all the employees love. Automatic deposit. Goes right into the bank. The employees love it.
Or the company you said,
It's a company,
what's paychecks?
Paychecks. And it's just one of a number of them. And, they'll do your W-2s. And you don't even have to do it right away at the beginning of the year. I became the treasurer through osmosis in November. I found Paychecks and said, can you do this for me? Yeah, send me all your stuff for the year. We filled it all, they backloaded it into their system. All my W-2s came out perfect.
Okay.
And so I would recommend, don't try and kill yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, and you can, you can spend. When I became the treasurer, I don't want to give horror stories here, but I was in the church office more than the pastor was, I believe. I was there probably
Yeah.
40, 50 hours a week, going back for several years, trying to figure out, where did this come from? Where did that go? Because like Cheryse says, I hadn't seen an audit, and I wanted to make sure that I wasn't in the middle. Because ultimately, there's $50 missing. Must be the treasurer, right?
Hey, Jeff. Jeff is also our Synod's treasurer. If folks have follow-up questions or conversations, would you be willing to be a partner?
Sure.
You've worn both hats too, Synod treasurer and congregational treasurer.
And I,
Great. Let's-
one of the first questions I asked when I became the Synod treasurer, I sent a note out to all the churches. Tell me what you use for an accounting system. And it really is varied. There are. You're an accountant?
Jeff, we have to go upstairs.
You're an accountant. But, if you're an accountant, if you have an accountant, that's one thing. If you don't have an accountant, it can really mess things up.
Thank you.
And, unless you've been there for, how many years have you been doing this?
Me?
Yeah,
15.
15? Oh, you're,
I haven't completed yet.
you got it down.
All right, friends, we have to get you back up for the final wrap up. Thank you all.
Can I say,
Please.
QuickBooks is not making a desktop anymore as of June 2023, so if you are using a desktop version, you might want to switch it to an
Good pro
That's what the
tip.
old guy was doing when.
Okay.
That's-
Simple Church is another one that I, along with.
Simple
Shepherd's
Church. And we've got ACS Realm. ACS Realm is another recommendation. So before you go, let us close with a word of prayer, a blessing for you as treasurers and financial secretaries. The Lord be with you.
And
Also with you.
God of the details, we thank you for the ministry of all treasurers and financial secretaries. Guide them in their work. May they feel your nearness and wisdom as they go about their tasks each week. And may this pathway of service always be a pathway to a deeper understanding of you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thanks, everybody. You'll head up for the final wrap up.